Hey guys, this is Rez. In today's session, we're gonna talk about weights. Well, a real live example of weights. So, if you noticed last video, we talked about weights and what they are and what it does, and we even made an example. Here, we're gonna kind of figure out where to actually use them and why should we use them and so forth. So on. So, before we go on, I just want to point out that weights kind of gives an importance to that element inside the layout, right? So we tell the layout, hey, give more importance to this, to take this amount of space, etc., etc. So this could help out in a lot of ways. Is kind of like saying, when my screen is this big, or when my screen gets bigger and becomes like, let's say, a tablet, I want it to always take the same proportion, right? If it comes to a phone and becomes, let's say, horizontal, I want it to still take the same amount of portion of the screen as the next guy over, right? Or the same quantity or percentage. So think of, if I have 100% of my screen, I want it to always take 20% of that, whatever the case would be for the screen size. Now this becomes really useful because sometimes you add elements, you're going to add it as, hey, the width and the height is 20 pixel or 80 pixel, and I don't want that. I actually want it for the layout to decide how big it would be, how tall it would be, proportionally to this other thing, right? So this proportionate thing comes in mind is the important thing. So a good example that the developer.android.com posted for this layout weight is the email app. So when you're sending an email, you have the to, the subject, and the message body. Obviously, the to and the subject should be one-liners, while the message body should take the whole screen left over. So by doing this, you kind of have a good amount of proportion, and yeah, so when you switch it to horizontal, it should take the same amount, is what they're trying to say. Anyway, so let's get into it, and we'll try a couple different orientations and screens to figure out what's going on. This is one way to get better at designing and kind of keeping the same screen look when doing something, right? Anyway, so we need a couple things in there for making our email app. First, we need the linear layout because that's where weights come in. The orientation, I'm going to set it to vertical because we want it to go from up to bottom. So to, subject, the body, and the send. So we're going to start here and write in edit text, and we're going to match the parent for the width and wrap content for the height, right? And just to show you what I mean by this, let's add a hint. This is kind of a watermark. Basically, it displays the text until the user types in text, and then it disappears. It's to kind of give the user, hey, a sense of this is where you should type the, let's say, the to, without adding a label right beside it, which kind of clunks up this already small amount of space. So here we're going to add 2. And if you look, we have 2. It looks nice, good size, everything's perfect. So let's add another edit text. Do the same thing. Match the parent for the width. Wrap the wrap content for the height. And we're going to add a hint that says this is the subject. Alright? So we got 2 one-liners. Looks nice. Everything's sweet so far. Let's add another one. This time we want to add the body. Okay? We're going to do the same thing. Match the parent. Wrap the content. And I want to add a hint. This time I'm going to go 2-liners so we kind of see how it looks and feels. Obviously we don't need to do that. We could have just typed in body. But I'm going to say add here for gifts later on from Santa Claus and friends. Okay, just enough for it to be 2-liners. I just wanted to see how it looks. I really don't know where I'm going with that. And lastly, we also want to send it, right? So we need to add a button. We're going to do the same thing, layout width. We're going to match the parent. We're going to wrap the content. And we're going to write a text in there. We can't write a hint because a hint is kind of going to be replaced by a text. So in the text here, we're going to write send in capital. And now we kind of have an idea of what everything looks like. So if we look, they're all kind of okay so far, except for the body, which is not taking the right amount of space, right? So what we could do is kind of tell the edit text Here, let's just try it. We're gonna add a weight. So as we type in weight, you'll see the layout weight comes up. Again, the layout means, hey, tell the layout, whoever it is, currently it's linear layout, to decide what my how I should look like, or how I should be weighted in this system. In this system, the linear layout is vertical, so the weight is gonna be vertical, or it would have a normal weight going downwards, like the Earth, right? So basically, what we did here, where we put layer 1, it's basically saying, hey, after you filled in everything else, whatever's remaining, kinda fill it with my body. All right. So if 1/3 of everything is taken by the edit text for the 2, the subject, and the send button, then the 2/3 left is going to be taken by my my body, which has a total weight of 1. Right. So let's say if I delete my subject, look on the right for my body, you'll see it kind of gonna gets bigger. The send is still at the bottom, taking the same amount of space. The 2 is still at the same amount of space, but the body is taking more. Right? Because there's no one else with any weight. So after those, they got their amount for their wrap content. This would take everything else. All right? So that's pretty neat. Now, another way of doing this, because sometimes we have more stuff to do. We could even share it if you wanted to. You know, we could add a weight here and say, well, that's going to take 1 as well. It's going to share the remainder with these 2, right? Look, they're the same size, while the 2 and the send, they're only taking enough for the wrapping. Okay, so this is another way. Another interesting way is to go over here inside my linear layout, and it's to add a sum weight, or weight sum. I just write weight, I write sum and I see it, okay? So in the case of here, I kind of have to divide my whole screen into X amount, and I'm going to give it proportions to each, right? So if I'm going to divide the screen, let's say I divide it into 20. Okay? Currently, body's not taking much because it's only taking 1 space, right? So here I could give these guys, let's say a weight, and let's say 1. Let's see how it goes. It's a bit too big. Let's put 0.5. Still too big. 0.1. Or you know what? Let's make the weight go to 30 because that's too big. And over here, I'm just going to give it 1. Or, why is it taking so long? Well, let's give it 1 for now. We'll come back to it in a second. I'm going to give another weight 1. This one, I want it more than that. We'll come back to it in a bit. And the button also, I want to give it a weight of 1. Oh, I know what's wrong. Okay. So the problem here, the weight is also adding onto the height that I have, which is wrap content. So what you want to do here is make this 0 dp. Now the weight is going to matter more, because the 0 dp says, hey, take this much space and then have this much more weight. So here I'm going to change the weight to enough that I could see it, right? So let's go back to 20 actually. That might be better. So here the weight is too big. 1 is not enough to see. Let's go with 2. 2 looks perfect. Again, let's put that 2. Take off the height to 0 dp, and this will leave it at the end. Height again 0 dp, and we're gonna leave it to 2, so we could see everything. Now there's a 20 amount of space, right? This whole thing. Currently my 2 is taking 2, subject is taking 2, and my send is taking 2, so that's 6. So out of my total weight of 20, there is 6 that's already taken. 14 left over for my body, right? So we kind of create the same thing. And if we go back on our design, if we go on to what's it called, we change the orientation, this kind of messes up. So it's kind of a harder thing to do. It's better if you go back to how we did it before. Let's just undo a bit. Let's see how it looks. Keep going back, keep going back. Just gonna take off weights from everything else. I should have just deleted stuff, it would have been faster. I'm doing undo, guys. If you don't know undo, it's Command Z or Control Z, whichever computer you're on. So let's go back into our design. See how it is when we only have 1 weight and everything else is wrapped. So everything is going to be showing. So we're just gonna change orientation, and you see here, it looks much better. Even though in both cases we could have done worked it, sometimes it messes up because the weight is taking too much, right? The weight isn't that amazing when you specify it here and it's like off numbers. Um, yeah, that's not the best explanation I have. But basically, if there's too much weight, it's still gonna overlap or go outside, or the weight system wouldn't work perfectly. So the best bet is to do these wrap contents and to give them a weight after that. So the wrap content will make sure that that's going to be displayed, and the weight over here is going to force it to take whatever space it requires. We could still add the sum weight and give them weights, but we shouldn't take off the wrap content. All right? And let's try a couple designs just to make sure everything works. So here it's fine, here it's fine. Change it to a TV, still takes the same amount of space. Change it, well, let's see, orientation wise. TV doesn't have different orientation. I should have known better. Let's go a big screen tablet. Change the orientation. See, it's always going to take the same amount of space, which is great. What else? Let's go to really small generic phones. Let's go to, oh, actually, let's go to a really small one, 2.7. How does that look? Still looks fine. Hey, that's great. Let's change orientation. Still looks great. Okay, so this is what you kind of want to aim for whenever you build an application, where you could support multiple devices as best as you can. So here I try a bunch. I would recommend you guys to add a couple other ones, especially the main ones. So like currently there's the Pixel that's out, the Samsung, the main brands that are be selling a lot, because those are the brands you want to make sure you work for, because there's a lot of people for them and they keep buying them every year, right? Anyway, so this was Rez. We just talked about weights. Hopefully you understood something. If you have any questions, please ask me. Stack Overflow is also a good place to go. Go on the Android developer website. That's amazing. If you have comments, questions, likes, subscribe, do whatever that is that they do on YouTube, let me know, guys. I'll answer you right away. Cheers.